Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of All Things Policy. I'm Suman, your host for today. Today's episode is a Bangalore special. You'll all know why soon. For listeners from other parts of the world or the country, be assured there will be something you will learn through this episode too, because while this is focused on Bangalore, there are lessons for all Indian cities from this. To start off, the one thing that has come to define Bangalore, apart from being startup city, IT city, garden city, and all, is the traffic that we encounter every day, the pothole roads we commute over every day, and the general urban chaos that has come to characterize this city, or all cities in India for that matter. Right? You would have also, but people in Bangalore would have seen some news of some ward commissioners trying to fill up potholes, etc. The other big development that has happened in the last few weeks is the Greater Bangalore Governance Act that actually revamps governance in significant ways. This, everybody hopes, will make the city better. To discuss the main provisions, to understand the impact that this will have on each one of us, and also to give us a window on how we as citizens can make a difference, I have with me two very special guests. The first one is Mr. Mathew Idiculla. Mathew has made a significant contribution to the Greater Bangalore Governance Act in its original form. He is a lawyer, researcher, and a writer whose work focuses on issues around Indian cities and their governance system. He has taught courses on urban governance at the National Law School of India and at Azim Premji University. He also hosted a course on Open Takshashila on the urban governance systems itself. He is currently a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Law and Justice at the University of New South Wales, Sydney. Hi, Mathew. Welcome to the show. And it's really a pleasure to have you speak on this important topic for all Bangaloreans.
Thanks, Suman. Great to be here.
Yeah. Also joining me today is my colleague Bharath. Bharath Reddy manages the Tech and Policy course, is also part of the research group in the Hydrogeopolitics group at Takshashila. He is an old Bangalorean, has keen interest in all things Bangalore, and you'll know why soon. Okay, so to begin, Mathew, can you just give us context to why this act became necessary? What was the original context of this whole thing? And what was the journey through which we actually came here?
Thanks, Suman. So, the Greater Bangalore Governance Act 2024, it has a long history. It sort of comes out of the sense or the felt need that Bangalore cannot be governed in the existing model of the BBMP with one city corporation managing about 800 square kilometers and over a crore of population. And in 2014, actually, that's when the first Siddaramaiah government instituted a expert committee on BBMP restructuring with the idea that you need to restructure the BBMP and have maybe divide the city corporation into multiple corporation. And at that time, the talk was trifurcation, how to trifurcate and whether to trifurcate into three corporations. That was the initial thinking behind creating this committee and also thinking about how to structure a new governance system. And the committee sort of gave its initial report in 2015 2016 and then came up with a draft bill in 2018. This is the draft bill for Greater Bangalore governance, and I was partially involved in drafting that, as a consultant to the committee at that time. This is 2016 to 2018. The exercise has been on for about 10 years. The idea to restructure, and it's finally come about.
Given the way we move in India, 10 years is not bad, I would think.
Yeah, maybe not too bad. Yeah. So that was the initial sort of setup, and then what happened was that government lost power. The report never got implemented. Soon we had the BJP government under Bommai coming in 2019, and a new legislation was drafted, that is the BBMP Act, which basically made some changes to. It did not really transform the system much. It just introduced some changes in terms of it introduced some sort of administrative decentralization through zonal committees, and that was the BBMP Act. It has had a short life. It's now been repealed, and the new Greater Bangalore Governance Act has been introduced. So this has again come out of the same expert committee on BBMP restructuring was reconstituted in the new government, new state government, but with a slightly broader mandate, and has been rechristened as the Brand Bengaluru Committee, with a wider ambit of trying to improve the brand of Bangalore, and that this committee sort of worked for the last about 2 years to sort of come up with this early draft, initially which was submitted in June July 2024, and then that draft is there for public consumption. It's there online. Then it went to the government, sort of took it up. It went to a select committee of the Legislative Assembly that's been headed by an MLA from Bangalore, Rizwan. And there were a lot of changes that were made to the draft that was made by the committee. And finally, a different version of the draft was formulated, and that's the one that got passed. And yes, for the since last 2 months, we now have a new legal mechanism which governs, which is the Greater Bangalore Governance Act. So yeah.
Great. Congratulations on at least getting some version of your original document finally into play, right? That must feel good.
Well, it's mixed feelings, honestly, because,
a lot of changes from what you.
Yeah, in terms of the certain elements or certain framing around the problem and the need to have a three what we're calling a three-tier structure. All of that was there in the committee's version and in the version that we worked on. So that sort of, at least the framing is there. This, as I say, the devil is in the details, right? So if you look at the details of it, if you look at what's actually finally done, you see that much of the old framework around the BBMP Act and the Kannada Municipal Corporations Act, it has sort of come back. And also in terms of preserving the power of the state over the city is possibly even enhanced one more step further. So there are certain sort of concerns.
Yeah. So you want to take us through the key differences between two, or what it means? What are the main provisions? Take the listeners through this whole thing.
And W, when talking about, does it really, what measures exactly are in this new act that devolve power down to the local bodies?
Yeah, thanks. So what is, forget about the multiple versions that we had, and so basically there's been 3-4 versions of this law. So let's not really get into the previous versions, because none of them, though as much as I would be interested in talking about it, because I was involved in those previous versions more than this version. But let's just now discuss the law and the act as we have it today, and what the key changes are, that it is introduced, and how it will may or may not affect. There's no may not question. It affects every Bangalorean in the way governance is structured. So I would say the Greater Bangalore Governance Act basically does two things, right? One is it splits the municipal corporation into 5.
City.
Under the law, it's up to 7, but the number that the government has chosen is 5. So at one level, it splits the municipal corporation into 5 different. So you have 5 different municipal corporations, and each of them are municipal corporations and not some zone or anything like that. These are all independent municipal corporations of 5. You have one for north, south, east, west, central. So that's one thing. The other thing it does is it creates something called a Greater Bengaluru Authority, which is a integrating layer on top of these 5. So what it basically does is it's supposed to do 2 things. One is it's supposed to decentralize power through the creation of 5 municipal corporations at one level. But it's also the other aim of the legislation is also to integrate all the functions of civic administration in the city in one body. So it's almost like doing two opposite things: centralization of certain things and decentralization of certain things, right? So what are those two things? So decentralization is mostly in terms of through creating these five corporations, the daily civic functions, like, whether it's water, sanitation, garbage, roads, potholes, all of this gets decentralized to the corporations. But what is the integration happening? Integration is in terms of overall functions. If you look at things in Bangalore, you would actually realize that much of what we see as civic functions, much of what we see as daily governance functions, are not performed by the municipal corporation. Municipal corporation is one player in a larger galaxy of actors which are involved in your daily life. So whether if it's water, you have something called the BWSSB. If it's transport, we have BMTC and BMRCL. If it's electricity, you have something called BESCOM. So there are a range, and when it comes to questions around planning and administration, and you have something called the BDA and BMRDA. So there are a bunch of agencies, all of them which function, which have of some level of autonomy and only one level of responsibility only to the state government, and they don't have any sort of responsibility at the level of the city. And there's no real body which holds all of these, all of these various parastatal agencies or civic agencies together. So the core aim of this bill in all its forms, and including the one that has been passed, is to integrate all these agencies together at one level under the Greater Bengaluru Authority, and to decentralize power to various municipal corporations. In this case, dividing it into five municipal corporations. So these are the two big changes. There's also, within the framework, an idea of empowering wards, which I would say in the current version of the bill, it's not there that much, but which was also within the overall framing. And in some ways, that language survives in the law, which says that it wants to increase participation and empower ward and everything. But again, as I said, the devil is in the details. You may not have it that much in the final version of the bill. So that's pretty much what the bill does, and we can already see some of this. If you're following the GBA handle on social media, they've been very active. Some of these things already at play. So yeah.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the distribution or the is like a segregation on geographical boundaries. So, and
yes,
this area will be managed by this corporation, but the centralization functions are more of a coordination between the different agencies and overseeing the different powers that, delegating and overseeing these things, right?
Yeah.
And but to what extent has power been devolved from the state government to the GBA, which will then be coordinating these different agencies, whether it's BWSSB or transport or all of these things. So do they have the ambit to plan and implement these ideas that they might come up with, or is that still with the state government?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It's a good question. So, in terms of devolution of powers, the corporations actually, retain most of the powers that they already had. The only thing is that they didn't have too many powers to start with. So, the corporations' powers haven't increased at all in any way. Arguably, it has diminished because you have a Greater Bengaluru Authority now sitting on top of the corporation. So, arguably, the powers of the corporations have diminished, but otherwise, broadly in its structure and framework, it is pretty much exactly the same as what we have had since 1976. That's the model of the legislative framework we have been on, the Kannada Municipal Corporations Act. So the corporations function mostly in the same way. When it comes to the Greater Bengaluru Authority and whether there's devolution there from the state to the GBA, well, there's not real devolution per se, because devolution as an idea is ideally to a different level and to a corporation. The GBA in many ways is a subset of the state government. That's what it is. It is, it almost, at least in its, if you look at the members who are there, if you look at the structure of it, Again, as I said, there have been many versions, and in some of the earlier versions, it had a much higher representation of the corporations and the mayors and the deputy mayors and a few other members of the corporation to be represented there. But the GBA structure that is there presently, which is in the present law, it's largely state government dominated, with the chief minister heading it, and the deputy chief minister, sorry, not the deputy chief minister, but the minister in charge of Bangalore. In the present case, the minister in charge of Bangalore happens to be the deputy chief minister. The minister in charge of Bangalore being the co-chair of the Greater Bengaluru Authority, and the co-chair and the is also in charge of what is called the executive committee of the Greater Bengaluru Authority, which is in charge of everyday functioning of the Greater Bengaluru Authority. So, in that way, the state's influence is very much there through the GBA itself. It's just that earlier, in terms of how this integration of various functions used to happen, it used to happen informally. Meaning, it was not that BWSSB, BDA, BESCOM, all of them sort of never spoke to each other at all. There was no formal mechanism which brought them together, right? So sometimes the CM would suddenly hold a meeting and call all the bosses, and then there will be they will all come up, and then you will give directions. So what this has done, it has sort of formalized that sort of system, which has already been functioning in an informal sort of ad hoc way, by creating this Greater Bengaluru Authority, but with a formal structure which has all the heads of these various parastatal departments, but also supposed to have the mayors of all the city corporations, all the 5 city corporations, which we don't have any now. Of course, we have not had elections in so many years. So once those happen, they also are supposed to sit in the GBA structure. So and very quickly, on what they can do, right? On what the GBA can do, the GBA basically performs 3 sort of core functions. One is, it is responsible for planning. So the planning function, which earlier used to be done by the BDA, the Bangalore Development Authority, is now going to be done by the GBA, right? So the GBA is the planning authority. So it is supposed to do overall planning. The other core mechanism is coordination and integration of the parastatal agency. So that is clearly there. So as I said, there might have been some sort of informal mechanisms earlier. Now, what it provides for is that the GBA can give directions to BWSSB, BESCOM, various parastatal agencies, saying that please do this, and those parastatal agencies are mandated to follow those directions. So it's given us sort of a chain of command clearly identified. Earlier, we didn't really have. We had multiple, as as the usual sort of the reference that some of us have used is like, it used to be an orchestra without a concert master. So everyone could play whatever tune they wanted, and the cacophony that comes out of it is what was what usually came out of it. Here, the attempt is to have some level of integration and chain of command through the GBA giving clear commands to various agencies, and those commands are now laid in law, meaning there has to be a direction, the directions have to be followed. So that is laid in law, and the paracitals are supposed to follow the directions of the GBA. So that's the main, I would say, one of the main features of this new setup. And the third function is what is broadly called administration, which is about trying to ensure that all the city corporations' overall administrative framework in terms of appointment of commissioners, appointment of staff is handled by the GBA. So these are the 3 core functions which are laid down in law, and so in many ways it empowers the GBA to conduct the affairs of the city in a fairly powerful sort of way.
Okay. Yeah. So while we read about policy concepts, we talk about the rowing function, the steering function, etc. The steering function shows the way, while the rowing function actually is execution, right? So do you see that excuse me, do you see that analogy working here too, the GBA being the steering function while the corporations and the parastatal agencies just doing the rowing bit? Of course, in each of them, they will again have planning and
Yes.
Thanks.
I think that's a good analogy, and I would say that you can see a bit of that here. And I would say that in terms of the original imagination, that's pretty much what it was. That the GBA would would largely just do a steering function. There's no rowing at all involved. It's just supposed to, indicate how, integrate, make sure that there is some sort of, balance in how things are done. There's coordination. It did not really have a steering function with the GBA doing its own projects. But if you look at the present legislation, you see that the GBA has a bit of steering function also. So it is rowing
Rowing.
plus some steering, meaning it is in charge of basically, if you look at if again, as I said, if you read the fine print of the law, you see that it has functions over big projects, what is called the major infrastructure. So the major infrastructure department, which was there earlier in the BBMP, uh, so the major infrastructure department has not been divided into five, but has been taken up,
Yeah.
at the level of the GBA. So in some ways, for those things, there's a bit of steering too, but otherwise, in planning coordination, it's a rowing kind of function.
Matthew, I just want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about the coordinating role that the GBA is supposed to perform, right? So,
Yeah.
and what does that mean in practice? So, does it mean that, like, all of us might have seen that a new road is laid out, and then
Yeah.
either
Then digs up.
BESCOM or BWSSP comes and they want to lay a electric line or
Water.
water sewage kind of, right? So is it something like this, or do you see coordination? What are these aspects of coordination, so that we can get a better sense of what it means?
Yeah. So thanks. So honestly, what the GBA does is, what the law does is, it provides for the GBA to give directions and to make the paracitals accountable to the GBA at the citywide level. But in terms of the everyday thing that we see, uh, uh, a mostly sort of okay road has been, for whatever reason, suddenly, they start retarring it. And of course, this, we don't want to get into all kinds of reasons, good or bad, that might be behind it. What is the contract that is involved? Who gets paid? Who's the contractor? What is the relationship between the contractor and the counselor and the BBMP engineer who's involved? Whose uncle is who? So that's for a different matter. Maybe a different day we should have debates around how all of those things operate. But you see, on an everyday basis, you see construction of road happening. Sometimes roads are just,
Yeah.
bike topping is done for God knows what reason, right? And then after that is done, then suddenly it's dug up because a different agency is in charge. So at one level, the idea was to sort of prevent this through some level of coordination across. But I don't know to what extent this mechanism will be able to solve it, because for this to really be solved, you need integration at every level. Meaning,
Yeah.
the Greater Bangalore Governance Bill at the present formulation is largely giving integration only at the city scale level. What about integration at the corporation level, integration at the zonal level, and integration at the ward level? Now, for if you have integration at all of these levels and then have clear chain of command, protocols being mentioned, that if BWSSP has to carry out a thing, it has to be done in coordination much before, not like, so that even the way works are decided, there can be a timeline, and all of them sit together and work out that timeline. At the present version of this bill, I don't see that clearly there, but it honestly doesn't mean it cannot be. Meaning, this is just a law. Everything need not be stated in law. If an integration is provided for at the citywide level, you can hopefully also have some level of integration at the zonal and the ward level, and that can be through specific what do you call specific regulations that can be made. So yeah.
Yeah, just moving on from there, we'll. I'd like to just go over on a higher level
Yeah.
what this means in the context of 73rd. I mean, we know about the 73rd, 74th amendments to the Constitution, which is actually talking of local governance and all of that. So, does this actually further the cause of the 74th Amendment? Or, I mean, how will this play out in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think at a broader level of, if you're thinking of decentralization and at a broader level, it is, in aiming to do some decentralization through the creation of multiple cities, but I mean, multiple city corporations. But there is also a concern, and I would say it's a fair concern, that this is going against the spirit of the 74th Amendment, because it the GBA is largely populated by state
Mhm.
authority, meaning largely the chief minister, the
Yes.
deputy chief minister, a bunch of bureaucrats, and everyone mostly representing the state and very little representation from the city. And even if there is representation from city, it is MLAs and MPs who are actually supposed to sit in the parliament and the assembly, and not really
Yeah, that's not their
be.
job. Hmm.
So in that way, there is a bit of a concern, I would say. And in terms of the way it is at least framed now, with the GBA being extremely powerful, I mean, I wouldn't say maybe extremely powerful, but at least a dominant player with a high amount of power, and it performing what can be seen as municipal functions. For example, as I said, the things like the infrastructure, right? The major
Mhm.
infrastructure works, which is a civic function which should be ideally performed by by a municipal corporation. So the steering part of it being done by a authority which is actually not there in the constitutional scheme, something like a Greater Bangalore Authority is not thought
Yeah,
about in the
right.
constitutional scheme.
Coming to that.
That raises certain concerns, and I would say that I think there's already a petition filed in the Supreme Court challenging its constitutionality. We'll have to wait and see what actually comes out of it.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to go back on the steering rowing. You're saying that GBA is the steering function, which has some rowing in it, and therefore
Yeah,
it's a bit muddled up, right? Yeah, just
yeah,
for the list, just to clarify a bit. Okay.
And devolution happen. Everyone wants devolution, but only till
There.
their level. They don't
yeah.
want to devolve it further
Further.
down, right? So that's an interesting takeaway as well.
Yeah. The I mean, all of this is fine. Governance structures, all of this governance. I mean, the GBA, the zonal, I mean, all of it seems like jargon. For our listeners who are citizens, interested in the city, who are actually dealing with the day-to-day urban chaos, how will this translate to for them, and what does it really mean in terms of citizen service delivery?
Yeah. So, in terms of service delivery, uh, whether it will directly have an impact, I think the jury is still out. I would say that there is possibility, because we can only sort of predict what can happen. There's a possibility that some level of accountability, some level of closeness, because it increases the closeness between an important agency like a municipal corporation and the people by creating smaller city corporations. So generally the idea in is that small is generally good when it comes to addressing local issues. And for example, I'm sitting here in Sydney, where we have about 35 different corporations, councils across the jurisdiction of the city, and each council is doing a great job, right? And we are not used to that sort of system in India, where you have different. I mean, we have in some cases, city having multiple councils, but it's not that common. So one is the idea that if you have smaller, it can be better. So for each corporation now you have a commissioner who seems to, and these are all new people who have been appointed. I've just been following what they're doing. They're all new young IAS officers who have been given some task and responsibility. And now you'll also have, hopefully after the election, a set of mayors coming in, all for these five corporations. So there is this idea that maybe if you have this sort of setup, each of them would try to sometimes compete with each other, try to appeal to people as much as possible, and that can result in better sort of
Yeah.
service delivery. And also the idea that the accountability structures are more clearly laid down. So through decentralization, the accountability structures being laid down, as well as hopefully in terms of the discussion we already had about the digging of the roads by different agencies, right? So if you have an integrated framework, ideally it should be able to solve that. As I said, it's heavily contingent on the fact that you carry that integration across levels. Otherwise, it will be very hard to do. So presently, we don't know if it will happen. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But the potential, I can just say the potential for that is there. And we see now, all these influencers putting out videos and you're reacting to it, and then suddenly one
See,
Gora influencer comes and puts out something, and then suddenly the BBMP is running after it. So that's one way to do it. Hopefully, this instead of that sort of shock and awe technique, you can have that sort of slightly small shocks and small awe techniques happening at a more localized way, and that can possibly improve the system. But as I said, it's very difficult. We are in a mess. Let's not deny that. To get out of this mess is really difficult, and this is possible. But again, it's really up for the grabs. So yeah.
yeah, I think the fact that smaller corporations means that you will see your corporator more often,
Yeah.
and the fact that uh, that person will feel the pressure of not
Yeah.
delivering
Yeah.
may actually because otherwise it was this one person sitting in wherever Hudson Circle or wherever this place is,
Yeah.
and nobody knows who this person is. Nobody knows. There is no face-to-face,
Yeah.
even interaction with this person, and that person has no actual incentive to come and look at every part of the city. Like
Yeah.
only the ones that will probably get more get more eyeballs or something is what they focus on. Now that
Yeah.
it's all smaller and more more visibility in terms of meeting with your constituents may drive, or at least as a hope, may drive more results or productivity
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. Just one addition on that. So one is you're dividing the city, so you'll have 5. So that's one aspect. Also the wards. So far we have about 200 wards. The wards will, I mean, again, it's not clearly, we don't know what is the final number. The wards we are thinking will be about 400 totally, with about each city corporation having about 80 watts. So that actually changes the dynamic quite a bit. So it further makes the government and the corporation smaller and more accessible. So yeah.
Yeah, and the competition between the different things. Which area is better to live in? Because somebody has done some work already. I mean, the real estate prices already reflect those things. But yeah, I think some amount of competition between these smaller municipalities also will drive better citizen delivery. At least that's my hope, right?
Yeah.
So I think that
Yeah.
that is something we can look forward to. You spoke about the wards. The next question I have is about citizen participation in these wards. Like, what's the constitution, and how do we as citizens actually, how can we make a difference in this whole thing?
So, under the new Greater Bangalore governance framework, the wards haven't been empowered in a great way in terms of overall power. It's largely the powers of the ward is similar to the ward and the ward committee is largely similar to the powers of the ward and ward committee, which used to be there earlier. So the big change is more in terms of the ward might become smaller and hence more accessible. But in terms of overall framework and structure and functioning, it has not changed much. But there's this one major change I would say is that the members of the ward committee, earlier we had 10 members for ward committee, all 10 members nominated directly by the city,
Also,
by the municipal corporation, without any sort of, I mean, with just basic ideas that there should be some, there can be some RWAs, and there should also be some representatives from the SC community, ST community. So that was the only basis of it. Now what we have, instead of 10, we'll have 14 members in each ward committee, 14, and that is divided of 7 and 7. 7 of them would be nominated in the old style itself. They're directly nominated. And the other 7 is actually in an interesting, I think this is possibly the first time this is happening in India. The other 7 will be picked up by lots. So if you're interested, you can just put your name to it, and in a sort of, as I say, the only thing fair in life is chance. So if how do you decide who should be in a ward committee? If you're a member of the ward and you want to be part of the committee, you just put your name in it, and 7 people are randomly chosen by draw of lots. It seems to be a fair way of representing citizens in the ward committee. So I would say that also changes the way the ward is structured. So I would say it's fairly slightly better in terms of the composition of the ward committee, but in terms of the powers and what they can do, it's not that different. In terms of citizen participation too, there's no real extra, sort of layers of citizen participation that is possible. It still continues to be the old structure. There's no, new real forums that have opened up. So it still continues to be only the ward committee. The ward committee becoming slightly smaller might make citizen participation in ward committees maybe slightly more easier. But otherwise, I would say there are not many citizen participation empowering features in the new law.
Okay, cool. I think Bangalore has seen a lot of citizen movements. The lakes, or all the lake rejuvenation has seen a lot of citizen participation in this. So, I mean, I would not like to leave with complete despair on that. I mean, if we have made those kind of initiatives work, I see that I am sure that citizens will put enough pressure and get this going even better. Like if you've given them 7 whatever, again it is dependent on how much you can game that lottery system, who games it, which way. There are all those questions also in my mind, okay, about the lottery system itself. So I think it's still okay in the sense that we have seen citizen movements coming up, and the fact that we are giving citizens a broader platform to participate, and the entire structure itself is better, at least is a one step forward, is one thing that I would take away from this. Bharath?
And just on what you mentioned, so do you see any similarities in how are there other examples of something like this in other cities in India or other places? How does it compare with any precedents that are there, or is this an example that other cities could also?
So, can other cities, because all the problems that we mention here are problems that are not specific to Bangalore. All cities in India face this issue of traffic, roads, whatever, in different degrees, right? So, are there lessons that other cities can also take from this? And I think the first thing, of course, is elections. Every city I see is not having elections for whatever reason. But yeah, from the governance structure, are there lessons that you have learned from other cities, or lessons that we can learn? Other cities can learn from the GB.
Yeah. So in terms of precedents, we don't have too many precedents. The only major precedent we have is Delhi, where it was initially split into 3 and then it was rejoined back. But both under specific political considerations. Even this can be seen as specific political consideration of the Congress party, if you want to see it like that. So that's fine. But so that's the only major splitting example that we have seen of a major city in India. In terms of a structure of what we are creating, essentially is though there's the mention of a 3-tier structure with GBA, corporation, and ward, essentially it's a 2-tier structure with the GBA and the corporation. And this sort of 2-tier structure for municipal governance is not common in India, or hardly exists in India, but you can see that in various parts of the world actually. So that is where, in some ways, this idea comes from. Even the idea of a Greater Bengaluru Authority is very much based on the idea of a Greater London Authority, which exists and which was not there earlier. Again, London, like I mentioned, has 32 boroughs, 32 different councils, and it did not have an overall integrating layer on top. So the Greater London Authority, provided for an integrated layer on top, which will handle things like transport and all citywide functions, whereas local functions will be handled by the local councils. So that's the model that has been thought about. And you have similar 2-tier structures in various parts. Even in the US, you have the county, and so you have the sort of system existing. So that's what's being thought about, and that's what's being tried here. And I honestly feel at least that broad idea, I wouldn't, as I said, I'm not necessarily a fan of how it has been implemented here in terms of what is contained at the at the city level, meaning, as I said, the city level is over-dominated by state government now. It should be more populated by people from the city and not people from the state. To achieve that, it's going to be very difficult given the political economy of how our states function and the role of cities in the state government's imagination. The
Yeah,
city is
yeah.
always the cash cow, which gives all the money, all the land, and that's where the money comes from. So the state wants to have a, hold over the city, so they don't want to let it go. So until those changes really happen, until we actually decide that okay, we need a really transformative system, then that's a different ballgame. Then everything can change. So the question of how it can work in the larger context in other cities as well, I would say, if that level of change, for that to happen, I think we need a fundamental change in the way politics is done in the country. And we need champions for cities, champions for city governance and local decentralization, you know in the existing system. You can't just have champions from outside, meaning MPs and MLAs should actually start saying that no, we don't like the system this is in. But nobody is usually willing to say that because they are the ones who are holding the power. And as we said, someone who holds the power now never wants to
Give it up.
give away the power. Everyone wants power and retain power. So that's going to be the challenge. But I would still say that the idea of two levels of city government, with one level which will directly address issues of daily governance, and the other level doing larger integrating functions like transport and overall sort of administration. That idea is something I feel it's there globally. It has not been there in India. It is being tried in the case of Bangalore. Uh, I would say in a highly imperfect manner, but the idea can still travel further to other big cities. Whether it's Hyderabad or whether it is Chennai. I think it can travel. So we'll have to wait and see whether it travels, how it travels, what form it takes. Because whatever form it takes, my sense is, given the existing political economy sort of considerations, the second level will be dominated by the state. So if the
Yeah.
second level is dominated by the state, then all of the ideas of decentralization really falls apart. So that's a challenge. The ideal system would be you have that second level which has some state representation, because we have to be realistic when we're talking about policies, right? But it should not be as dominated by the state as we see currently.
Yeah, I think, and that kind of representation will come only when cities are given powers to generate revenues for themselves in a big way, right? But I think that is a topic all by itself. The entire public
Yeah.
finance part of the cities is, I think, we can reserve that for another episode
Yeah.
completely. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll just say that it's absolutely relevant, right? Meaning, presently, as you said, the city is the cash cow that the state actually sort of uses to do its politics. So, and the city does not really have that much of revenue generating potential itself. I mean, it has some, other than property tax, it has very little owned sources. So it's highly reliant on the state. Whereas actually the cities have potential, much higher potential, if you actually reformulate the public finance distribution structure. If you do all of that, then what I said, as this larger change of cities being powerful and the second layer and this two-tier sort of system working, it is more possible to be done. But within the present public finance, the way it is skewed towards the state and to the union, it will be very hard for that change to happen.
Yeah, given those constraints, I think this is a good step forward. Let's see how it goes. And I think in a few months' time, we'll call you back and just check on the evaluation of how this is playing out in real. Yeah. But
Yeah.
Bharath?
Yeah,
I think,
maybe. Yeah.
Recently there were a lot of conversations on social media about how Bangalore has the weather, it has the people, and maybe the infrastructure will also get at least move a couple of steps forward with this development. And any closing comments, Matthew?
I mean, nothing much other than let's keep our fingers crossed, because all of us are Bengalurians and we want the city to improve. And all I can say is that it's very incremental. In policy discussions, there are all kinds of ways in which it can change. You can go big bang, or you can have incrementalism. We are, of course, used to incrementalism, and that seems to be the way in which our policy processes operate. So this is, I would say, only in that sort of incremental sort of change, and it's not really big bang, at least the way I see it. I just hope that it's incremental to the better and not incremental to the worse, because honestly, I'm not entirely sure where it's headed. Even though I've been part of some discussions on this and been part of the process, I'm still not entirely sure where it's headed. But as you said, let's just keep our fingers crossed and see what happens. And let's again hope the elections happen, and only then you can actually see what plays out. Because there was a BBMP Act earlier. That act functioned without an election ever being completed. So we don't know what that BBMP Act really meant, because elections were never held. So the
Yeah.
provisions of the Act never came into being. Only once you have elections, and then you see how all of these function, what is this competition, how do all of these things operate, only then you get a sense of the Act. Otherwise, what we see is one DK Shukumar, going and, directing potholes to be filled and all of that, without any mayor, without any of the corporators. So we don't know what the system is. Once you have the elections, once it's done, then we'll have a sense of what actually will play out.
Yeah, so elections are fundamental, basic tenet of democracy. Anyway, that's what democracy is about. But yeah, to leave our listeners with a final note is that, go check out first check out which corporation you belong to. Go see what your ward committee looks like. And if you are really interested, you should go and put your name into that lottery. Let's hope some of us get in there. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mathew. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Thanks, Bharath, for being here. And we'll catch everybody up again on where this is going in a few months' time. Thanks, everyone, for joining in today.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.